Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Recklessly Skeptical Podcast. My name is Matt.
My name is Josh.
And I'm Joe.
Today is Sunday, May 14th, 2017, which is Mother's Day. So first off, we want to say Happy Mother's Day to all the wonderful moms out there, and especially my mom.
Yep.
Hi, Mom.
Hi,
Happy
Mom.
Mother's Day.
We love you, Mom.
I love my mother, and I love yours too, Matt.
That's my mother, too. Stay away from my mom.
Get the hell away from her, Josh, you freak.
Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers, though.
Shut your face, Grandma.
What was that? All right. Well, let's get to the stolen thought, shall we?
Sure.
Let's do.
So this is coming from V.S. Ramachandran.
Who?
No, he got it right.
I know, I'm just
V.S.
teasing.
Ramachandran.
Ramachandran.
So it's kind of a long stolen thought, but here we go. Quote, how can a 3-pound mass of jelly that you can hold in your palm imagine angels, contemplate the meaning of infinity, and even question its own place in the cosmos? Especially awe-inspiring is the fact that any single brain, including yours, is made up of atoms that were forged in the hearts of countless far-flung stars billions of years ago. These particles drifted for eons and light years until gravity and change brought them together here, now. These atoms now form a conglomerate, your brain, that can not only ponder the very stars that gave it birth, but can also think about its own ability to think and wonder about its own ability to wonder. With the arrival of humans, it has been said the universe has suddenly become conscious of itself. This truly is the greatest mystery of all. End quote.
I like that. I like that quote.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It is long, but I don't know. It is interesting, though. It's like the universe did come conscious as soon as we became conscious. You know what I mean?
Well, self-aware, because, we're a piece of the universe. We're inside of the universe. We're not something other than the universe.
Yeah.
So, we became aware of ourselves, and the universe also did the same.
Well, it reminds me, too, of a physicist is just a collection of atoms trying to understand themselves.
Yeah. And one of the things I like about V.S. Ramachandran, he was on some of the older, it wasn't really atheist stuff, but it was science. Can science and religion exist?
Like together?
Yeah. What I was thinking of is Beyond Belief, and there were a couple different seminars, and this is how I became introduced to Dawkins, Dennett. Who's that guy you like?
Sam Harris.
V.S. Ramachandran, and same with not Bill Nye, but
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson. I became aware of all of them all at once because and this is really one of the seminars I ran into when I was doing becoming skeptical of things and becoming agnostic. It was called Beyond Belief, and it's now hosted by the Science Network. I don't know if they were the original hosts of it, but it has. It's like 2 days worth of seminars or speeches from various different people, and they're mostly talking about how these are all scientists talking about whether they think religion is going to be a carry-along into the next phase of who we are as human beings. And
you mean culturally?
Yep. Will religion survive if science does what it should do, which is culturally win against the dogma that's existed so far and the fairy tales that exist? So what does religion look like, and how do we adapt? Sam Harris was actually one of the took about the hardest stances that you could against whether he thought of religion as being a thing that does not come along. And same with Dawkins, but we all know that. So check it out, Beyond Belief, Science, Reason, Religion, and Survival.
What I think is funny, the more science we learn, the less religion is, the less religious claims that we have. The more, and it's not that science is the enemy of religion. It just science disproves a lot of religious claims.
Science is using reason and skepticism, and when you apply those to religion, you tend to lose at least some of your religion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that V.S. Ramachandran that I remember the most is kind of like the spirit-body duality, and he thinks that's nonsense. Because everything that you can attribute to, or that people try to attribute brain-wise into, that is being a spiritual malady, he's able to locate in the brain. Like he wrote the encyclopedia on the brain, and I think that's actually the name of the book, the encyclopedia on the brain. It's like a $10,000, $20,000 book, and it's several volumes, and it's all medically based stuff with medical studies and stuff. So if you guys want to get me a birthday present, you can get me that $20,000
$20,000 book.
V.S. Ramachandran. You might be able to get a discount if it's on been used.
Well,
they'll knock the price down to 7 G's.
Yeah.
if I ever did that for you, well, never mind. I was gonna say
Go
you
fuck
need
yourself.
you need to make copies for me, but if I can afford a $20,000 book, I could probably afford another $20,000 book that I could read. So
Yeah. All right, let's go to Gallup Daily.
go.
I was about to say Gaily Dallop.
And all I
Gaily
heard was,
Dallop.
let's go to gay. Where are we going?
We're going to the Gallup Daily, and it's Trump job approval. The unemployment rate, the real unemployment rate is at 8.6. The Gallup Good Jobs is at 44.9. Engaged at work is 32.8. Economic confidence is down to 1, and it starts to go into negative numbers from here if we get any further down. Consumer spending is at $84, which is significantly down, and then Trump's approval rating is below 40. It's at 39%.
Where it belongs.
Yeah. And you can kind of see the same trend in 538's overall poll, and you can see he's sliding, he's becoming less popular, and his disapproval rating is going up. And this has to do with the story that I'll cover later on, or at least I think it does. So,
All right, so this is coming from Think Progress. Okay, it was published May 8th. Scott Pruitt removed scientists from EPA advisory panels to make room for industry advocates. The Environmental Protection Agency has started notifying members of a scientific review board that their terms as EPA advisors would not be renewed. Move experts in the field are calling unprecedented. Scientists who serve on advisory boards at the EPA and other federal agencies typically are allowed to serve 2 full terms, but late last week, the agency, under the leadership of Administrator Scott Pruitt, informed several scientists on its 18-member board of scientific counselors that they would not be permitted to serve a second term. Robert Richardson, an ecological economist and an associate professor at Michigan State University's Department of Community Sustainability, said that in almost all cases, scientists are reappointed for a second 3-year term. And in January, Richardson was told that he and other 8 members of the panel who were nearing the end of their first term would have their positions extended for a second term. But on Friday at 6:20 p.m., I received an email saying, "We've submitted paperwork to request that your appointment be renewed. However, the agency has decided not to renew your appointment," Richardson told Think Progress. Pruitt reportedly plans to consider replacing the academic scientists with representatives from industries that the agency is required to regulate. Scientists see potential harm in allocating a certain number advisory panel seats to industry scientists. Frankly, it represents a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Board of Scientific Counselor does, Richardson said. I've seen quotes from EPA spokespersons that have said that we need a different mix on this board because they have a heavy hand in approving regulations. But members of the advisory panels have no authority in approving regulations. They don't review regulations and don't make recommendations with regard to regulations, Richardson explained. Courtney Flint, a professor of natural resource sociology at Utah State University, also was notified by email that her appointment to the Board of Scientific Counselors was not going to be renewed. This came as a surprise, as I had been told that the appointment would be renewed. No other reason was given, Flint said in a statement emailed to Think Progress. A total of 9 board members were affected by this decision, according to Flint. It's clear from the reports in the media that the current administration has said that they want to replace board positions held by academic scientists with members from the industry. So I don't think I am speculating when I say this is a political move, she said.
Absolutely.
It's completely political. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. Just a little bit. Just a little bit right here. The membership of these advisory panels has always included credible scientists from industry, nonprofits, non-governmental organizations, and think tanks, he noted. There has never been any restriction against appointing people with credentials from a non-academic sector, he added. By making these changes, Pruitt and the Trump administration are hoping to look like tough guys, like they're getting tough on all the liberal scientists, he said. But in reality, it's all for political show with no real practical change being implemented, he added. In reality, the board never stood in the way of industry. The board was an advisor to the administrator, and the administrator gets to choose whether or not to accept any advice or recommendations from the SAB.
This is for profit.
Oh, yeah.
That's what this move is for. You take scientists off of a board where they're supposed to be protecting the environment, the EPA, and put on people that are not going to protect the environment.
Well, it's people from the industry. So the board is there, tell the industry to not do certain things because it's going to cause issues to the environment. So they're getting rid of the board, basically, the scientific people who understand the environment, and putting in the people from that industry that's supposed to be regulated and advised.
Yes.
And so they're going to be doing their own advising, basically.
Yes.
So
Self-regulation.
Yeah, self-regulation. So they're going to be doing whatever the fuck they want to. Mm-hmm. You know, without health concerns or concerns to the environment, which is a joke. And that's the Trump administration right there.
But Joe, why wouldn't they want to try and do their best?
Because they don't care. They want money.
Oh, money.
And they don't think the environment is in danger.
Wait, you're telling me these highly profit motivated groups would try and seek more profits over the health of individuals?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
It's
yes.
almost like regulation is a good thing.
Yeah, I know. Jesus Christ. And this is a direct jab at you libertarians. You guys know that these companies aren't going to give a shit. Fight Club, you watched that movie where he talks about it. It's a calculation. It becomes a calculation of these corporations. Are they going to make money even if they have to pay out on some settlements? And the answer is yes, they're going to fucking do it.
Well, because the settlement isn't going to be as much as how their profits. You know what I mean? The settlement is always a small percentage compared to the profits that they make.
And if there's the possibility that a lawsuit won't happen, so they are taking the risk of something possibly happening against for sure profits.
Yeah.
These profits are going to make the profits, but they might not get sued. And then if they do, like you said, Joe, it's going to be a smaller payout.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? So really, and legally speaking, there's this. What we're talking about is there's recourse whenever you're harmed, and that recourse will still stay there. It's just that there won't be the regulators in place to say this is also a crime, and so you'll be able to sue someone if you get sick. But in order to do that, you have to prove that that's the cause of your being sick. And the only time that you really have a chance of getting money in these types of circumstances where you've been impacted is in a class action lawsuit where you and several other people who have been impacted can actually afford the lawyers and the law team to go ahead and prove that you've been impacted negatively by these environmental changes. So guess what Donald Trump, or not Donald Trump specifically, but guess what the Trump team has floated getting rid of? Class action lawsuits. But it hasn't happened yet. As soon as it happens, though, trust me, it's going to be the story that I tell for the week.
And you know what I imagine as well? I imagine that whenever there is a lawsuit against these certain industry leaders, I imagine the lawyers for these people go to the EPA, and the EPA says, yes, we advised against them doing that because of this health issue or this environmental issue. But now that these industrial leaders are putting their own people into the EPA, there will be none of that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It kind of damages, it muddies the water with the mens rea, like the idea that you know what you're doing is wrong. So,
yeah.
Like you can make somebody sick, the actus rea of these types of lawsuits. So, or the actus reus, like you can kind of prove with the doctors that they're making it sick. But if they're not doing it intentionally, like we had no idea that all of this stuff in tobacco was carcinogenic.
Yeah,
and it's like if you can't prove that, then you have a harder time winning the lawsuit or getting the punitive amount. So if you can prove that they're intentionally doing it, like when the insurance companies refuse to pay out or use these shady practices, there's a punitive damage to it. So they have to pay out that the amount of the lawsuit, plus they have to pay out like extra on top of that. And that's why McDonald's at one time had to pay out like $10 million for someone who spilled coffee on themselves. It's because in that case, McDonald's was going above. They were intentionally making people burn their tongues with the coffee. So that, and they had talked about it. It was at 190 degrees, 30 degrees higher than what they were allowed to have it. And you'd burn your tongue on the coffee, and then you wouldn't realize how shitty your food tasted. And this is, and like, it sounds bizarre, like
but that's a fact.
Yeah, I mean, it's documented in case that's the very likely reason. Of course, they denied it, or their lawyers denied it, but there was emails. There's email evidence of this shit happening, and yeah, I mean, I'm paraphrasing too, so but read it loosely. But yeah, you can look up that case online, the details of the case or the news stories around the case.
And you mentioned cigarettes a second ago, Josh. It's the same thing. If there's not a board of scientists telling them, hey, don't do that, this is bad, then if a lawsuit does happen, they're just going to bring in their own scientists, and that's in quotations, and be like, oh, our scientists said it was okay. You know?
So they have deniability to some degree, so there's no punitive amount rewarded.
Yes.
And then they are able to say, oh, your life was only worth, you're kind of middle class, lower middle class. Your life was worth maybe $100,000 plus burial costs. That's what we'll give you, $120,000. But thank you for smoking.
All right. So this story is kind of along the same lines because it's people making money off of fucking people. Representative Tom MacArthur, he is the architect of Trump Care 2.0. He had a town hall, and somebody yelled at him.
You're supposed to be vetting doctors and vetting hospitals and knowing what an MRI costs and knowing what a CT scan costs. And if I need a cardiac catheterization, how much does that cost? And does it cost different if I have this doctor or this doctor? It's completely immoral. And this is the point, Congressman. This is the point. Because health insurance as a for-profit business is immoral. When I am drowning and you insist that I pay before you will save me, that is immoral, sir. Completely. You have no legs to stand on. You want to make money off of me. If you're in insurance, you want money off of me. And the reason that it's not going to go to single payer is not because you don't believe it. It's because you know that the insurance companies have a powerful lobby and they would decimate you.
You know what's funny is that sounded like Jacob's voice, a friend of the podcast, but it sounded like nothing that he would ever say.
Yeah.
It's the exact opposite of what he would say.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. That's why I want single payer. I don't. These insurance companies that are all for profit. You hear people who don't want single payer. You're robbing from Peter to give to Paul or whatever, you know. And it's like, well, if someone is out there in the water drowning, and you have the ability to go save them, to save their life, to keep them from dying, and you swim out there and you go, hey, how much money do you got? What? I'm broke. I don't have any money. Fine, fuck you. I'm going to swim over to this real rich guy over here who's drowning, who has the money.
Well,
you know, and it's like, that's shit. That's crap. That's immoral.
Yeah, and a couple of things about your analogy that are kind of off. First off, they don't let the rich guy get too far out because they don't need to ransom him. He can afford a health care and insurance for the health care. So preventative medicine saves people a lot of money. So, like, going to the doctor regularly, the reason why insurance companies want you to do that when you're healthy and young is that they want to avoid you becoming a huge liability because you're insured. They want to wait until they can kick you off of insurance or until you're on Medicaid. And then the other thing is that, I mean, like, they'll let you. Republican talking point that pisses me off is like, oh, well, we won't stop you from going to the emergency room. And it's like, well, by the time I have cancer and you won't do treatment on me, then I'm going to the emergency room more frequently. And like, if I could get the treatment for the cancer, which I can't afford, then you could save my life instead of watching me die slowly in the emergency room over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Single payer will save everybody money. I can't stand that people make this argument that it would make the price go up. That's fucking bullshit. And then people also make the argument that the U.S. has the best health care. People come here from Canada and all over the world. a small amount of people come here for healthcare because healthcare in all these other countries is better.
Well, yeah, like our healthcare, like our technology, the knowledge we have towards healthcare, I don't believe it's number one. I think we're kind of low on the list. Well, not low on the list, but
what was you said technology?
On technology and
no,
yeah.
I mean we're pretty advanced as far as the technology goes, and that is the kind of the trade-off is that when you go to the profit motive that's there, does get cut a bit, and so there is more advanced science and there is more science research happening in the Americas. But here's what you do: is there's a lot of money that's being paid to insurers that doesn't need to go to insurers that you could use as taxes and then use towards science research. Like the people, the scientists who are actually doing the work aren't that motivated by profit. They don't care about whether their company gets some patent or not, but the companies surely do.
Yeah.
But you can look at things all over the world where other countries have great innovation and have created certain treatments and cures for things because they don't have, like you said, insurance companies or companies trying to keep certain things down,
like hindering the technology.
And that's the thing that they ask themselves before they'll fund a research project: can we patent it and can we make money off of it? And if the answer is no to either of those questions, guess what? That project gets scrapped.
When that project could have been life-saving or could have been useful.
Yeah, and that's what so what's his name who runs Facebook is doing
Zuckerberg
is taking a different they have a science group, and they are taking a different approach to healthcare, not healthcare in general, but studying the human body or disease. And what they're doing is looking at how a properly functioning body should work and then dealing the science from that. And guess what? That is not going to make them any money. And that's the reason why they're doing it a completely different way, because what they do is in the medical field is they say, where's the problem, and let's try and find a treatment for it. They're not really looking for a cure or looking at restoring the body to perfect health.
Yeah.
If there is such a thing.
I mean, I'm the specimen of perfect health.
Yes, you are, Matt.
Sure. I saw the last picture you were tagged in where you're at the bowling alley, and I was like, whoa, man, that's quite the beer gut.
That's bullshit.
Defend yourself, Matt.
Defend yourself. Here,
I
use
don't
this
need
broken pencil.
I don't need to defend myself against fake news.
Fake news. So what I think is the big news story coming out of this week is that President Trump fired FBI Director James Comey, and that the story that I'm going to read from comes from the New York Times. Washington. President Trump on Tuesday fired the director of the FBI, James Comey, abruptly terminating the top official leading a criminal investigation into whether Mr. Trump's advisors colluded with the Russian government to steer the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. The stunning development in Mr. Trump's presidency raised the specter of political interference by a sitting president into an existing investigation by the nation's leading law enforcement agency. It immediately ignited Democratic calls for a special counsel to lead the Russian inquiry. Mr. Trump explained the firing by citing Mr. Comey's handling of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of private email server, even though the president was widely seen to have benefited politically from the inquiry and had once praised Mr. Comey for his guts in pursuit of Mrs. Clinton during the campaign. But in his letter to Mr. Comey released to the reporters by the White House, the president betrayed that his focus on the continuing inquiry into Russia and his aides. While I greatly appreciate you informing me on 3 separate occasions that I am not under investigation, I nevertheless concur with the judgment of the Department of Justice that you are not able to effectively lead the Bureau. Mr. Trump said in a letter to Mr. Comey dated Tuesday. White House officials refused to say anything more about the 3 occasions Mr. Trump cited. And then later on in the story, Mr. Comey's deputy, Andrew McCabe, a career FBI officer, became acting director, the Justice Department said. The White House said the search for the director will begin immediately. The firing put Democrats in a difficult position. Many had hoped that Ms. Clinton would fire Mr. Comey after taking office and blamed him for costing her the election. But under Mr. Trump, Mr. Comey was seen as an important check on the administration. Kellyanne Conway, a senior White House advisor, said the firing was not related to Russia. Today's actions had zero to do with that, she said in a contentious interview on CNN. Democrats were unconvinced. Any attempt to stop or undermine the FBI investigation would raise grave constitutional issues, said Senator Richard J. Durbin, Democrat of Illinois. Mr. Trump's decision to fire Mr. Comey marks the president's latest law enforcement purge. In late January, Mr. Trump fired Sally Yates, who had worked with the Obama administration but was serving as an acting attorney general. In March, he fired Preet Bharara, the United States attorney in Manhattan, after assuring prosecutor months earlier that he could stay on. But the president's firing of Mr. Comey was far more consequential, as Ms. Yates and Ms. Bharara both were holdovers and might only have served in the Trump administration for a couple of weeks. And kind of to paraphrase some more of the story is that usually FBI directors go over different presidencies. Their term is usually considered to be 10 years. So let's talk about this. And there's more to talk about than just this. But what do you guys think about his firing? Is it like the Republicans are saying and the Democrats are hypocrites?
No, it's not.
So how's it not?
So I want to point out the hypocrisy of Trump, because months ago you can find clip after clip after clip of Trump saying Comey is a good director and he did a good job, and now he is saying he fired him because he treated Hillary unfairly. And that's the thing. People think he fired him because he didn't do a good job going after Hillary. He's doing it for the opposite reason, because he treated Hillary unfairly, is what he's saying.
Yes.
Yeah, he said he didn't like the way he treated Hillary, and he didn't like how he set up so many investigations against her and all that stuff, and it was unfair, and so he fired him because he's not a good guy. But during the campaign, he was saying the exact opposite, and that helped get him elected.
Yeah, so now he is saying that, but during the campaign, he was thanking Comey, and he was saying, lock her up, lock her up.
Yes.
So he's a complete hypocrite.
And Trump was saying that with no evidence.
With no evidence, and you have Trump supporters saying he's firing her because he did a crappy job investigating her. It's the opposite. They honestly have no idea what they're talking about.
No, most Trump supporters don't. I was talking to this kid at work, and he doesn't support. He never supported Trump, but he supports Trump now because he just hopes Trump does a good job so America doesn't go to shit. But he was saying there is one good thing I can say about Trump, how he funded his own campaign. And I'm like, actually, he didn't. He only funded 6 to 7% of it. Out of the almost $100 million raised, he only funded about 6 or 7 million. So anyone who supports Trump in any sort of fashion does not ever research or actually knows anything that Trump has said or done or anything. They just listen to the latest thing Trump has said, and they go, we're here, see, Trump's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's like, but he was saying the opposite thing last week, and you were saying the same thing. See, woohoo, Trump's awesome. It's like, no, you need to fucking pay attention to what's going on, or you're as dense as Trump.
Well, and so here's the other – I mean, there's two other issues that I see that have been out in the news a lot this week. With this firing is his people, Kellyanne Conway and Sean Spicer, came out and were like, oh, he received this letter saying that what Comey did was indefensible, and it was a strong-worded letter, so Trump had no decision or no choice to make besides to fire him. And then Trump comes out and completely decimates that story by saying, I'd already decided it wasn't despite what that letter had said, I was going to fire him anyways. That letter just supported my decision. And so it sounded like he was just waiting for an excuse to fire him, and it sounds like this is something that he might have planned a couple of weeks ago.
And the guy who took Comey's place for now has come out and said that Trump is under investigation, or the Trump campaign, which contradicts his letter. Thank you for telling me 3 times that I wasn't under investigation.
Okay, and so one thing that I have to say about Comey's character is that he has held all of these investigations pretty close to his chest. And I mean, what circumstance should a president be asking his subordinates? Because technically, the head of the FBI is a subordinate because he's under the Justice Department, which means that President Trump can fire him or anybody in the Justice Department because it's an administrative office. at any point. So why would it be acceptable for the president to ask somebody who's supposed to be acting as a check on the president if he's done anything criminal, that whether or not he's being investigated? And this is, I read this funny thing on Facebook. Just one of our friends happened to say that he's doing a speed run of Nixon's presidency. And it makes sense because it does fit. It has some echoes of it because Nixon fired the guy who was investigating him. And so the reason that a lot of Democrats feel that they should have an independent investigation is that there needs to be somebody who does not answer to the president who is investigating him. And this would be somebody who answers to Congress. Congress can create a special committee, which then has a board underneath them, instead of underneath the president, where there is an independent investigation, and they report to Congress, not to the president.
And for the record, I never wanted Comey fired for the way he did things with Hillary and whatever during the election, because that's what people are saying. Oh, now Democrats are saying the opposite, freaking out that he got fired when they wanted him fired before. I never wanted that, and I don't even know anybody who did.
Well, and I would have been fine if he had gotten fired. Like, he had done some... Honestly, the way he handled the investigation, specifically him coming out a week before the election and saying, oh, we're reopening the investigation, and he didn't give any other context to that what that statement was, because all it was is that Anthony Weiner fucking did some shit, because Anthony Weiner always gets in trouble because he can't keep his wiener in his pants. He always has to send pictures to people. And there was some Hillary emails involved in that, and they already had most of them.
Yes.
I never liked Comey. I never did. One, because he was on the board of the Clinton Foundation. Also, when he came out and said under any other circumstance he would press charges and arrest Hillary Clinton, but in this situation, because of who she was, he wasn't going to. So she did break the law, and if it was anybody else, they would have been arrested. I didn't like that, and I didn't like Comey. But now, here Comey is, all buddy-buddy with Trump, investigating Trump, and all of a sudden he gets fired. It is a little suspicious. Well, it's definitely suspicious. But here's the thing. Either way, I'm happy that he's gone.
He asked
whether it was with Hillary or with Trump.
And here's the reason why you shouldn't be. And first off, I want to put this context in. No matter who Trump hires, they're going to know that James Comey was fired weeks after asking for more money, more resources to investigate to do this investigation.
Yeah. To
question the people around Flynn and Manafort, who were both Trump campaign advisors. And the reason you shouldn't be so happy is that person, whoever Trump ends up hiring, might not be as objective as Comey was, and they also might not be as politically motivated or motivated at all to continue with the investigation.
So it'll probably be a Comey for a Trump. Instead of Comey for a Hillary.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure that Comey. I haven't heard the what you've said, and I don't think he specifically said that
he said it in Congress. You can listen to it. He's being interviewed. How the Republicans got mad that he didn't press any charges towards Hillary when he came out and was being interviewed by the GOP. He straight up said all that shit. You can hear it.
He said that he would have arrested anybody else.
Under any other circumstances, charges would have been pressed against this person, but because of who it was, he wasn't going to. He straight up says it.
So we just spent a couple of minutes looking over some of the older videos. And so where I think you and I and James Comey all agree upon is that Hillary Clinton did mishandle the information, but
yeah.
He didn't explicitly state that she should be charged. And actually, he said, at least in his statement to the public, that she should not have been charged.
I said this off air, but I wanted to say it over the podcast. At some point, he did say if it was under any other circumstances or if it was anybody else, he would recommend charges being implemented. I will find that, and I will prove it to you. I can't do it right now, but I'm going to. I swear to God.
And just to kind of summarize where we're at on these points is that we, at least most of us, don't think that James Comey should be fired because we think that he was leading the investigation, or at least Trump shouldn't be able to fire him or shouldn't fire anybody while they're prosecuting or while they're investigating charges potentially against the president.
Yeah, it looks bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks way bad.
At worst, it looks really bad.
Yeah.
And so it's not because we care that James Comey is collecting a paycheck. We don't.
Honestly, I don't give a shit. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so Joe, your next story, if you're ready.
Oh, yes, I am definitely ready. So this is my science story, everybody.
Bum 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 ba bum ba bum.
Joe! And it's coming from the Washington Post.
Fake news.
Fake news. Title of the story is Rare as Winning the Lottery. New dinosaur fossil so well preserved it looks like a statue. Before being assembled into something recognizable at a museum, most dinosaur fossils look to the casual observer like nothing more than common rocks. No one, however, would confuse the over 110 million year old Nodosaur fossil for a stone. The fossil, being unveiled today in Canada's Royal Tyrrell Museum of Paleontology, is so well preserved it looks like a statue. Even more surprising might be its accidental discovery, as unveiled in the June issue of National Geographic magazine. On March 21st, 2011, Sean Funk was digging in Alberta's Millennium Mine with a mechanical backhoe when he hit something, or quote, something much harder than the surrounding rock. A closer look revealed something that looked like no rock Funk had ever seen. Just row after row of sandy brown discs, each ringed in gunmetal gray stone. What he had found was a 2,500-pound dinosaur fossil, which was soon shipped to the museum in Alberta, where technicians scraped extraneous rock from the fossilized bone and experts examined the specimen. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was a dinosaur, Donald Henderson, the curator of dinosaurs at the museum, told Alberta Oil. When we first saw the pictures, we were convinced we were going to see another plesiosaur, a more commonly discovered marine reptile. More specifically, it was the snout to hips portion of the nodosaur, a member of the heavily armored ankylosaur subgroup that roamed during the Cretaceous period, according to the Smithsonian. This group of heavy herbivores, which walked on four legs, likely resembled a cross between a lizard and a lion, but covered in scales. Unlike its cousins in the ankylosaur subgroup, the nodosaur lacked a bony club at the end of its tail, instead using armor plates, thick knobs, and 2-inch spikes along its armored side for protection, according to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. These guys were like 4-footed tanks. Dinosaur tracker Ray Stanford told the Washington Post in 2012. This particular one, according to a news release, was 18 feet long and weighed over 3,000 pounds. As Michael Greshko wrote for the National Geographic, such level of preservation is a rare as winning the lottery, he continued. The more I look at it, the more mind-boggling it becomes. Fossilized remnants of the skin still cover the bumpy armored plates dotting the animal's skull. Its right forefoot lies by its side, its 5 digits splayed upward. I can count the scales on its sole. Caleb Brown, postdoctoral researcher at the museum, grins at my astonishment. We don't just have a skeleton, he tells me later. We have a dinosaur as it would have been. The reason this particular dinosaur was so well preserved is likely due to a stroke of good luck, well, perhaps a stroke of bad luck for the poor dinosaur. Researchers believe it was on a river's edge, perhaps having a drink of water when a flood swept it downriver. Eventually, the land creature floated out to sea, which the mine where it was found once was, and sank to the bottom. There, minerals quickly infiltrated the skin and armor and cradled its back, ensuring that the dead nodosaur would keep its true-to-life form as eons worth of rock piled up atop it. That it is a boon to researchers, particularly given that teeth and bone fragments are much more common finds. Even partially complete skeletons remain elusive, Smithsonian reported. But they uploaded pictures of this thing. Look at that.
Yeah, that's cool. That's way cool.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah, you can see the scales and everything.
See all the detail on its
Like even its face. Yeah.
Yeah, so this will be posted in the Evil Atheist Facebook group.
I'm going to do it right now, son.
Sweet.
Well, this story is coming from Pathios Hemameta, the friendly atheist.
Do you know what's funny? I had somebody call in with that same name at my work.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
I'm like, maybe this is Hemameta, the friendly atheist, but it obviously wasn't. Like, I've heard Hemameta talk before, and he sounded nothing like the friendly atheist.
It would have been cool if it was.
Yeah.
So, Tennessee pastor Greg Locke fresh off his failed attempt at making Planned Parenthood feel really, really bad, wants liberals to know their ideas are stupid. All liberals, because we all think alike. What are these stupid ideas we liberals believe? Socialism is great. Climate change is an actual threat to our civilization. Overpopulation is a real problem. Guns are bad. And last but not least, you can identify with whatever gender you want to.
So explicitly, I do agree with 3 of those.
So that's why you're stupid.
Yeah, I must be.
I think I agree with 5 of them. I mean, guns are bad, not necessarily.
It needs to be contextualized, but
Yes.
I can see guns are not as useful in circumstances that some people think they are.
Yes, and maybe setting up some background checks so crazy people don't get them might be a good idea.
Yeah,
you know?
and
Agreed.
You
Yeah.
can identify with whatever gender you want to. That is kind of a more complex subject than that statement says, and so that's why I kind of agree with that, but I kind of disagree with that.
It needs to have a little more nuance there.
Yes.
It's hard to make just a blanket statement like that.
Well, yeah, it's not like, oh, I want to be a girl today. It's like there's this ongoing. I mean, there's this gender dysphoria that you feel, and that's how you know that you don't fit in with the gender identity that you're trying to portray at the time. So yeah, if that was more nuanced, I would agree with it. And guns are bad needs contextualization.
So I want to listen to just the first part of this video.
Is it going to piss us off?
Yes. He explains why he brought up these stupid ideas.
Hey guys, Pastor Greg Locke here. Every day of my life, liberals and progressives send me messages saying, how do you believe all that nonsense in the Bible? Nonsense, you say? Let me just randomly run down a few things that you believe that are super nonsensical.
So
Was that it? Thank you.
that's what I wanted you to hear, yes.
Yeah.
He's like, I believe weird stuff, but here's some of the weird stuff you guys believe.
Except our stuff is based on science. Like socialism is great, is again not nuanced enough. But socialism is a useful tool in government, especially one that's not corrupt.
Yes.
Climate change is an actual threat to our civilization. We know that to be a fact. Overpopulation is a real problem. Yes.
Yes. And he when in the video he talks about, oh, you can fit everybody into Florida if they're standing next to each other. But the point, it's not just we need room to stand. You have to have enough land to farm and feed everybody and drinking clean water. Like, there's all these different aspects that go into the problem of overpopulation.
Yeah, and we can have a higher population than we have now, but we're not taking the steps to making it to recycling the stuff that we would need to. Like we do all these things that are so counterproductive, like dump toxic material into clean water supplies. And these have adverse effects. So if we wanted to have a higher population, we could. We could definitely raise the bar on that. But also, there's no point. There's no reason for us to have our 11th billion person in society or in the world. Like, there's no good reason to do that. And while we eat up all these resources and pollute the air that we're breathing.
I don't like the fact that there's evidence and reason and scientific evidence and stuff behind the things that liberals say. You know, they're just not pulling shit out of their ass, and it's not an appeal to an authority like his book, which all that is. It's an appeal to authority being God, and it's a fallacy because there is no authority there. There's no demonstration of the authority.
But he likes his talking snakes and his floods.
But then he might say us agreeing with the scientists is an appeal to an authority, but we have proof that these people, that the authority is an authority in the field that they are talking about.
Well, and even though, but we don't just rely on what they say. We rely on the work. We
can go and look at the work. We can look it up online and look at the work and look at the research they're doing, and then look at the peer review research and stuff, and look at people trying to disprove their research and coming to the same conclusion that they have.
And
there's lots of evidence and research and thought and critical thinking put behind everything that we say and do. Well, most liberals, what a lot of people who look at the scientific community does, and stuff. But with his Bible, there is no peer review. There is no demonstrable evidence for all those crazy claims that they have of magic and woo-woo and, whatever it is that he's appealing to. There's none there. There is none.
Very true.
So he can fuck off. That whole thing Matt was saying, I believe in crazy stuff, but you guys do too.
Yeah, false
It's like-
equivocation at its best.
Exactly.
Or at its worst, really.
Yeah.
So to read the last line from this article, what a sad, pathetic way to live your life. Good job, Hemameta.
Yep. All right, so let's. Before I get into my final news story, I wanted to give some updates on news we're not covering. So let me grab that.
Woo-hoo.
All right, so this is coming from 538, a short recap of this week's news, and then I'll go over some headlines. A federal appeals court heard arguments on President Trump's stalled travel ban. Aetna, the insurance giant, said it would pull out of all health insurance marketplaces set up under the Affordable Care Act. The director of the Census Bureau retired unexpectedly amid questionings of the agency's funding, which might mean there's corruption. Trump announced the creation of a new commission designed in part to fight voter fraud, a problem that most experts agree does not exist.
And the guy he's putting in charge of that, I believe, was sued 4 times and lost for voter suppression.
Yeah, quite likely. Also, something that we talked about last week that was actually resolved before we put the podcast up is Macron is sworn in as the president of France. So Le Pen did not win. Think whatever you want to think.
Yeah, I believe as soon as we left the podcast, like less than an hour later, I saw the news that
That Le Pen lost
Yeah.
and Macron won. And I don't agree with all of Macron's politics, but so much better than Le Pen. Trump University delivers Liberty University commencement address, or Trump delivers Liberty University's commencement address. Kill switch limited but did not end global cyber attacks. There was also a cyber attack that affected over 20,000 computers. And also 8 candidates interviewed to replace Comey by, guess who? Jeff Sessions of the Justice Department.
Yay.
Trump's pawn, and then if Jeff Sessions likes them, then they'll go to Trump, and then Trump will nominate them for election, and then that will be the person who then gets to take care of the Trump thing. So yeah, conflict of interest much?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so to my news story. This is coming from BBC. North Korea missile test due to Kim Jong-un paranoia. The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, has accused North Korea Kim Jong-un of being in a state of paranoia following yet another ballistic missile test. The test was a message to the South days after the new president took office, she told ABC. The U.S. would continue to tighten the screws on North Korea, Ms. Haley said. Japanese officials say the missile, which was launched from North Korea's northwestern Kusong, reached an altitude of 2,000 kilometers. Moving on in the story. And to the header, is this a new type of missile? The nature of the launch is still being determined, but the analysis said the test could have suggest a longer range than previously tested devices. The Japanese defense minister said it flew for about 30 minutes before falling into the Sea of Japan. Tomami Inada said that it covered the distance of about 700 kilometers, 435 miles, reaching an altitude of 20,000 kilometers, higher than reached by intermediate range missile North Korea fired in February. Intercontinental ballistic missiles can potentially reach altitudes of hundreds of kilometers, taking them well outside of the Earth's atmosphere. So what matters on this is that they're getting better, and it creates a really, really scary situation because, like, what's the U.S. response? We've been trying to do sanctions on North Korea, but the problem with doing sanctions on a country like North Korea is you can't squeeze tight enough to get to Kim Jong-un, who you really want to get to.
Yeah.
So really, again, and this is something I've said in the podcast, is that China's the only party that can probably change the course of this. And the tensions are just going to continue to build up. And if essentially North Korea is holding South Korea hostage, so if President Trump does something rash, millions of people could die because all that Kim Jong-un would do is not launch against South Korea and possibly Japan. So it's scary shit.
And didn't North Korea or South Korea get another president recently as well?
Yeah, that's what this missile test is in response to, supposedly.
Oh, okay. So this story is about, can you guess who?
Donald Trump.
Sort of.
Okay.
It's about Jeff Sessions.
Ah.
So Sessions, and I know we talked about the memo before, right? The memo that is in place in the Department of Justice that kind of, if not protects people in states where cannabis is legal, it keeps them from being overly prosecuted.
Yeah. So the Obama was not for prosecuting regular drug users.
Yeah. So Sessions overturns Holder memo, returns to harshest drug sentencing policy. And it kind of discussed certain things that I know you are against, which is mandatory minimums.
Yeah, of course I'm against those.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I am as well, sir. All right, so I'm going to read bits of this story. Bits. All right, so this is coming from the Cannabist, May 12th. Washington, Attorney General Jeff Sessions overturned the sweeping criminal charging policy of former Attorney General Eric H. Holder, Jr., and directed his federal prosecutors Thursday to charge defendants with the most serious, probable crimes carrying the most severe penalties. The Holder memo, issued in August 2013, instructed his prosecutors to avoid charging certain defendants with drug offenses that would trigger long mandatory minimum sentences. Defendants who met a set of criteria such as not belonging to a large-scale drug trafficking organization, gang, or cartel qualified for lesser charges, and in turn less prison time under Holder's policy. But Sessions' new charging policy, outlined in a new 2-page memo and sent to more than 5,000 assistant U.S. attorneys across the country and all assistant attorney general in Washington, orders prosecutors to, quote, charge and pursue the most serious, readily probable offense, end quote, and rescinds Holder's policy immediately. The Sessions memo marks the first significant criminal justice effort by the Trump administration to bring back the toughest practices of the drug war, which had fallen out of favor in recent years with a bipartisan movement to undo the damaging effects of mass incarceration. This policy fully utilizes the tools Congress has given us, the Attorney General memo says. By definition, the most serious offenses are those that carry the most substantial guideline sentence, including mandatory minimum sentences. The new policy is expected to lead to more federal prosecutions and increase in the federal prison population. In February, Sessions seemed to prepare for that inevitability, reversing a directive from previous Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates for the Justice Department to stop using private prisons to house federal inmates. Cook has said that the Holder memo handcuffed prosecutors, and it limited when enhancements can be used to increase penalties, an important leverage when dealing with a career offender and getting them to cooperate. Sessions' memo says that there could be exceptions, but the cases must be approved by a U.S. attorney, assistant attorney general, or other supervisor, and the reasons documented in writing. The memo also directs prosecutors to always pursue sentences with the range calculated by federal guidelines, which are sometimes above even the mandatory minimums, unless a supervisor says it's okay to do otherwise. There will be circumstances in which good judgment would lead a prosecutor to conclude that a strict application of the above charging policy is not warranted, the memo says. In that case, prosecutors should carefully consider whether an exception may be justified. But I do know that a lot of people in the Trump administration, or the GOP, because it has become a bipartisan issue. So a lot of people are trying to fight against this GOP, and you have the people on the left as well. I don't know. It's Jeff Sessions, and we've discussed this before. He is outdated. His thinking is completely outdated. Everyone knows, even a lot of people in politics know that the drug war has failed. It's caused the rise of the cartels, which in turn has caused a lot of crime and a lot of death in Latin America. And then also when you make something illegal, you cause a black market for it, which causes crime to go up.
Yeah.
And especially something with something like cannabis. Cannabis has, the more we study it, the more we find out how good of material it is, or a drug that it is. They just did research in mice, and it shows mice that use it, that when they're young, adolescent mice, it causes memory loss. But elderly mice, older mice, when their THC is introduced to them, it causes better memory and better activity in the brain. So it's really interesting. We need to do more research, and Jeff Sessions is he's hindering progress.
Okay, and what I want to do real quick, because none of this is new. Like,
It's
none of
not
this is
new.
not things that we haven't covered before, but I want to recap some
But
of the
he
things.
did turn over, and we said as long as that memo holds, it should be fine. But he has overturned that memo, which most experts were pointing out that he wouldn't, and he has.
Yeah, and
So it is an issue. It's going to turn into a big issue.
so what happened is that the Senate has passed pretty broad laws in pertaining to drugs, and so the federal government can arrest and press charges against people who use or just minor drug offenders. And so the memo that he said is that, or not Sessions, but the guy before him, essentially, Holder said that essentially we're not going to press charges on these things unless there's unless you're moving drugs from state to state. So what's going to happen now is this is essentially saying, well, guess what? Even though your state passed a law saying that you're not going to criminalize marijuana, we're going to start pressing our charges.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have sanctuary states where the state is going to be no longer willing to work with the federal government on these types of cases. And this is exactly what happened with sanctuary cities, is that there's broad law on prosecuting people who have not committed crime but are there illegally to deport them. And a lot of cities have said that we're going to fight against, or we're not going to help you with that.
Okay.
It doesn't hold to our values, and this is what's going to happen with like Colorado and California and where's Portland, Oregon, and all of these states that have legalized marijuana. Like, they're going to push back. They're not going to help. And what you're going to have is this weird duality of the federal government is going to be this thing to be feared because Jeff Sessions is a jackass.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for listening so much. We love you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Recklessly Skeptical podcast. You can find us on Stitcher, Spreaker, and on YouTube. Email us at recklesslyskeptical@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/The Evil Atheists. And remember that atheists is always plural.